the world's favorite airline.
That ad was released in the year 1997. That's more than 20 years ago. Just from a show of hands, if the ad was to be released today, would it still hold true? How many people think this ad could be released today and it would still hold true? Outstanding. And I thought I'd see a lot of hands. That's the amazing thing. This campaign has always fascinated me. I don't know if any of you have seen it before. It's a beautiful campaign. It won lots of awards in that year. It had other lines. It had these beautiful print ads that I can visualize even now. I can see them in front of me. One said, all over the world, children walk to school, children run home. The world is closer than you think it is. And I still remember a third ad in that series which said, all over the world, little girls hate little boys. Then they grow up and marry them. It was a beautiful campaign. And I loved it for many reasons. I loved it because it was crafted beautifully. As you can see, it was a lovely film. It had some lovely print work. This is, of course, all pre-internet. I also loved it because it stood true for something that I've always believed, evangelized, spoken about, and I could spend the next 2 hours talking about it, but I'm going to keep this very brief. That human needs, human emotions, how we feel, who we are, has never changed over time. It's remained the same. So I don't really believe the millennial is any different from his father or forefather. It's just the expression of that need that has changed. It's the world around him or her that has changed. It's his or her relationship with the world that has changed. And what happens as marketeers is we often make the mistake of trying to re-examine, reassess, reinvent, and often over-process what the needs of human beings are. Whereas the truth is that they've never changed. What we're really seeking to do as marketeers is understand the world, understand how those needs have evolved, how cultures evolved, how the expressions evolved, and how the relationship of our audiences with the world has changed, and try and be a part of that changing relationship. Now, we could spend a lot of time talking about e-commerce, for example. We could spend the next 1 week talking about e-commerce. But if you were to actually plot what's happening in the world, and you were to put technology somewhere on one matrix, and you were to put migration, increasing influence, ambition, aspiration, double income families, the need for convenience, the advent of the mobile phone, the emerging customer, which is the woman and not the man, and then look at what the need for hyper-convenience is and ask yourself, what's happening to the world, the dots will begin to join, right? So I'm just going to reinterpret today's topic a little bit. It's a fascinating topic. I've spoken about it many times, but I'd like to reinterpret it from my view. And that view is, I'm going to try and provide, and I have the onerous task of being the first speaker and therefore setting conversation for the rest of the day, hopefully. So I'm going to actually provide some brushstrokes from the point of view of the world as I see it, not the consumer as I see it, and what's changing in the world. And I have to warn you that I didn't grow up in this world. If I was to loosely define this world, this is the world of the internet. I was born long before, as most of you probably were, long before the internet ever came. I started working long before I got an email ID. I didn't even have a computer when I started working. So I'm not a native of this world. I'm actually an immigrant. And I'm actually somebody who's constantly chasing both his tail and the younger people around me, trying to learn. And that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. The disadvantage is I don't speak as one of those who are inside this massive explosion, feeling it the way many of you in this room probably do. The benefit or the advantage is that from the outside, I have the benefit of being able to observe what's happening and look at the world and look at what's changing. And in my attempt to try and be part of it, to actually paint those brushstrokes. So that's what I'm going to try and do today. Now, in 20 years, I've actually been in many worlds and done a potpourri of things. I used to run an advertising agency called Leo Burnett, and then I became an advertiser. And then I became a startup person and I launched a TV channel. And then I decided I wanted to be in the internet world, and I did e-com for a while. I now lead a news tech company with 100 engineers and 150 content people. And I have no idea how all of this has happened. But sometime in the last few years, sometimes I've actually sat and asked myself, what if all these worlds came together? All these worlds that I've been part of, what if they came together? Is there a magic potion at the point of intersection of these worlds? If I could actually bring these worlds together, could everything change? And the answer always is yes. If all of this came together, this is actually really what's happening in the world. If I could just find that one point of intersection, everything would explode, magic would happen. But to my frustration, and this is very challenging, every time I try and plot the world, I don't find that one point of intersection. I actually find many points of intersection. In all of these years, especially the last few years, every time I have tried finding that single point of intersection, I found that none of these things, none of these worlds actually at any point of time is interacting with more than two other worlds. And that's very, very frustrating. So I try rearranging some of these pieces and I say, okay, let me turn this around, let me rearrange it. It's always the same. And that's changing, but that's very frustrating. Because actually we're in a world where as consumers, everything's intersecting. But as marketeers, we're often not finding that point of intersection. And we're always sort of intersecting with some things and not intersecting with some others. If these lines actually began to merge, and if the connections actually happened, I can tell you my work now, the work that I do, would become an infinite times easier. And I say to you and all of you, and many of you I'm sure are part of this ecosystem which is trying to intersect, that actually that is what the future is, and that is what the present is. This ecosystem which is trying to converge, which is trying to become one, which is trying to find that point of intersection, which is trying to find, how to work together. And actually as marketers, that's the first thing that's happening. We're trying to find ways for all of this to come together. Let me tell you a small experience. It's actually accidental discovery. It was probably staring me in the face for a very, very long time. Because of the work that I do. I'm sure all of you in this room have probably heard and read and know that the next 200 million customers on the internet will come from non-metro vernacular backgrounds. What that means is they won't come from the big cities and they won't be English speaking. That's interesting data. So one day I decided to remove all the cookies from my computer, which basically means nobody knew who I was. And just to be safe, I went into incognito mode, which meant nobody really knew who I was, hopefully. And then I started visiting these sites and the most premium sites. I found the most premium sites from the languages that the next 200 million customers are going to come to, and I started visiting them. Now, I don't understand many of these languages, so I started with Hindi. So I became a customer for Hindi, right? And of course, I was doing some other activity as well. I was doing whatever e-commerce I was doing, and I was doing, I was leading my life the way I was. And these sites here, and I've removed many of these names because it's unfair, actually represent 50% reach of all Hindi audiences on the internet today, right? And I went to these sites, and I started exploring them. This is the first language I can read after English. And I don't know if you see what I see on this page, but it's very, very stark. I see it and I look at it and I keep wondering. Somebody seems to have got this page right. I travel Vistara. Superb. I'm probably going to see a movie. Not bad. I'm possibly even going to buy a computer. It's great, some marketeers got it right. But I'm a Hindi customer. I've come to a Hindi site to read Hindi, and all I'm seeing is ads in English. I'll tell you what's even more baffling. There's a Hindi movie being advertised on a Hindi website to a person who has chosen to read in Hindi in English. That's incredible, right? And, so I thought maybe this is a problem with Hindi, and maybe the Hindi ecosystem's not evolved, and maybe something's wrong. Maybe other languages are far more evolved than this, and I should go and check out Malayalam, Gujarati, Tamil, Bengali. So I went language after language, and guess what I found? Ads in English, right? Now, something's happening here, right? The advertiser's got it right. He's got it right. He's giving me the right ads. The advertising agency's got it right. They're delivering the right ads. Commerce is probably right, because I might just click through these ads. Technology also seems to be right. But something is wrong. And this is what I mean by the ecosystem not converging, because at some point, that point of intersection is missing. And what's happening is that, and I love showing this diagram, because it's almost like we're running that race on the right side, and we're all running in the same direction. We're all running towards the same finishing line. We have the same purpose. We're running with each other. Nobody has said cross purpose. There is no I'll come first and you'll come second. But everybody is in different lanes, right? Whereas the real world, and the world that the best marketers in the world are actually busy cracking, is the world on the left. And those websites that I just showed you are a great example of what's happening on the right. Now, this call for convergence is all very good. The ecosystem should converge, and I have a sense that there'll be many people from the ecosystem in this room. I'm from the ecosystem, right? And we've all got to converge, and we've all got to, and it's happening. In the last 5 years, I can tell you it's happening at rapid pace, that convergence is happening at crazy speed. The number of people I meet from all of those different worlds on a daily basis is increasing by the day. But what do we converge around? What is the world converging around? How should this world converge? Where should the ecosystem converge? In 2008, when we launched Colors, the TV channel, we had this great belief that screens will converge, that the world will converge, and the world will converge around a screen. Of course, in those days, in our naivety, and this is pre-Facebook days, mind you, so it's been a while, even though it doesn't seem that long, we thought the screens will converge around television. Internet will basically make television the only screen. The convergence is happening, and is happening at a crazy pace, but it's not happening around the television. It's actually happening around a much smaller screen, and that is the mobile phone. And I say to you that my theory is that the mobile phone is actually the only thing every advertiser knows us by, every marketer knows us by, and every person who wants to reach us knows us by. The mobile phone is our identity. We're nobody. We are what our mobile phone is, because that's what we spend our entire life. Our online identity and our offline identity, willy-nilly, on a daily basis, are all converging on that mobile phone via the internet, via everything else that we do on the mobile phone, via technology. So when we shop on Amazon, when we shop at Apple on a kiosk, that's our offline identity. We are telling people who we are, what we buy, what we do. When we are on Facebook, when we are on YouTube, that's our social identity. And when you start putting all of these pieces together, everything put together is who we are. And somebody at the other end of technology who knows because I am my mobile phone, and it is that mobile phone actually that is connected to that person and not me, is looking at it and seems to know everything about me, except that I don't want to see English ads, right? So there's a problem there. Because if somebody really had all this information, and somebody does have all of this information, because the mobile phone is our identity, and the mobile phone is a device, is the DNA of who you are. Now, more savvy marketers in this room will turn around and say, over a period of time, we'll know who you are, we'll know what you do, we'll even know your name. Sure. But the DNA will always remain the mobile phone, because that is where my world converges. Now, if the mobile phone is so important and somebody knows that this device, named whatever it is in their Excel sheets, does this, then it should be easier to personalize. And that's why personalization in this world which is converging around the mobile phone is really the new holy grail. Everything is really about personalization. It's no more customer first. It's every customer first. The new holy grail, after tons and tons of data and big data and collecting warehouses full of data and spending billions of dollars in just amassing data, has finally boiled down to each customer. The new holy grail in this world which is converging and converging around the mobile phone is personalized. And in this personalized world, each customer comes first, except that in that example, I came first, but I came second, which is a problem. Because if I had come first and if I was truly a native Hindi speaker, the advertiser would have got disproportionate returns. If I really was a Hindi speaker and he gave me English ads, he probably got no returns, right? So in a truly personalized world, which some of you will argue is now looking at needle in a haystack because there's 1 billion people in this country, in incredible India. You're actually talking about 1 billion people and you're saying marketers should talk to 1 billion people one at a time. Doesn't make any sense. So at this point, I'd like to tell you another story. This is a story about a very favorite brand of mine right now because much to my wife's chagrin, I'm actually addicted to it and I'm binge watching. And because I'm binge watching and because I'm curious and because I was a marketer by training, I actually went and read up about Netflix. And to my amazement, I found that through the history of Netflix, by the way, Netflix has only been streaming for 10 years, before which it was a DVD rental company. But through the history of Netflix, which is not more than 20 years, its founders have never said that it is a company which is in the business of entertainment. You'll be amazed to know that every time the founder's been asked, he said, I'm in the business of data. He's gone on record to say that the reason his DVD rental business was successful was because he knew exactly what to suggest and recommend to each person. This is 20 years ago. There's a very famous story which is going around in the internet. I don't know if it's true, but I hope it is because it's such a lovely story. How many people have seen a show called House of Cards? Okay, some people. House of Cards is a cult show, almost cult show on Netflix. It revolves around the life of an American president. Now here's what's interesting. The producer of the show House of Cards says, and this is an interview of his that I've read, that he had this idea, he had this script, and he went around from streaming company to streaming company saying, please produce my show. And they said, have you produced an episode? No, I don't have the money. Have you done any research? No, I don't have the money. Sorry, we can't produce this. And then he went to Netflix and he said, please produce my show. I said, do you have an idea? Yeah. Do you have a note? Yeah. Do you have a script? Yes. Can you fill this questionnaire? Yes. One day later, they called him and gave him the money. And he said, what happened? Why are you producing my show? They said, we put it into an algorithm. And the algorithm tells us this show will be successful. So much for a cult show which was never going to be produced. And now knowing the story and knowing this about Netflix and having the benefit or the wisdom of having read up on the internet, when I actually go to my own account on Netflix, I begin to understand why I binge watch. Because they just seem to keep being able to recommend or suggest to me stuff that I keep watching. Every time I finish something, I end up starting something else. I have no idea what's going on. But to the argument of needle in the haystack and a billion people, I say to you, Netflix has found me and they've got me. And I have a feeling they've got millions of other people. And someday, they'll have everybody, one person at a time. And that is the power of personalization. So the Netflix story is not just a story of great content. It is actually a story of entertainment designed for you. And the operative word is you. So let's go back to the premise that I was on. There is needle in the haystack, there's personalization, there's convergence, there is a mobile phone. And hopefully I've established that personalization is a new holy grail. What's happening over and above this? What's really happening with the mobile phone? Let's talk about it for a minute. There are some stunning facts about the mobile phone that no country in the world, maybe other than China, can even think of. 90% of all internet consumption in India is happening off the mobile phone. 90% of all internet consumption in India is happening off the mobile phone. There is a whole generation of Indians, and they don't live in the big cities. Some of them do, not all of them. There's a whole generation of Indians who've grown up not with the television as their first screen, not with the desktop as their first screen. In fact, my bet is they've never even been on a laptop or a desktop. They've experienced the world only on a mobile phone. They've experienced shopping on a mobile phone. They've experienced television programs on a mobile phone. They've experienced education on a mobile phone. They've experienced retail on a mobile phone. They've probably interacted with hospitals on a mobile phone. And they're constantly asking the question, how can I do this better on my mobile phone? And every time they do more and more and more of this, we know more and more and more about them. And this I'll guarantee you, because I have gone back and done this research. They're demanding better experiences of their world from the lens of that small screen. At this point, I want to give you an example which is close to home about how life is converging as the world converges into the hands of this young customer who hasn't lived our life, who hasn't opened a newspaper and read it every morning like I did as a child, who hasn't looked at a large TV screen or gone to a cinema theater 50 times in his life before he saw his first television show. What's changing? And let's look at it from the point of view of a newspaper and from a recent example that I've been part of. So this is a newspaper, right? Just as a show of hands, how many people read a newspaper every morning in this room? A newspaper. Well, that's a lot of people. I do too, right? But there's a lot of people who don't. And they'll tell you in the newspaper industry that increasingly young people don't read this newspaper. Nevertheless, this is a newspaper. This is what we've known for 100 years, maybe 150 years. The concept of the newspaper is that it's a page. It's a collection of pages. Every page is defined. When you pick up a newspaper in the morning, if you read the newspaper every morning, you know what to find on every page. So like I get the newspaper in the morning, I turn it over and I first read the sports page because that's what I want to read. Then I turn it back and I read politics and India news. Then I quickly turn the pages and I know which page I want to go to read the op-ed. So it's a collection of defined static pages. And that is how we knew the newspaper. Now, as the world got on to the internet, what happened to the newspaper? The first thing that happened to the newspaper was, and full credit to all the companies, including the company I work for, they took the newspaper and they put it onto the internet. And it looked something like this, and it continues to look something like this. And let me tell you, a lot of people consume their newspaper even today as e-papers, which is basically the newspaper where you can turn the pages. So it is basically the newspaper, but available on the internet, so it's more convenient. But it is still a static page, and it's still a collection of pages. At which point, the internet evolved further, and we said the internet is about rich media, it's about clickability, it's about being able to recommend things, it's about interconnected pages, the pages need to be connected, and we got websites, right? But then we were still dealing with a newspaper, and this is the problem with not recognizing that the world has changed. We were still dealing with our legacy, right? The world had changed. The world was consuming a newspaper on a mobile phone now, on Facebook, on Twitter, on WhatsApp. When they were going to news sites, they were looking for what they wanted. If they didn't find it, they were going to another site. They were clicking through what they wanted to read, wanting to read it in 4 lines. If it didn't interest them, they wanted to shut it off. They weren't interested in static pages and the wonderful morning ritual that we were going through. So we went back and created a feed. Now, what is a feed? A feed is not a page. It's just a feed. It's what you experience on Facebook. It's what you experience on YouTube. It's what young people experience everywhere else. A feed is basically supposed to know what you want and give it to you there. It's not supposed to expect you to find the page you want to be on, then go to the information you want to be on, then read it, and then find more information. A feed is supposed to keep you updated. Either you tell the feed, I want this information, or the feed figures it out themselves. Now, firstly, this is mobile first. So the experience of a newspaper has been brought as a feed onto the mobile phone. Secondly, there is no static pages anymore, because these young people who've never read a newspaper, they don't care for static pages. Only we do. Thirdly, it's personalized. There is nothing called a newspaper for everybody. There is a news feed for me. I want the news feed to know what I want, and I shouldn't have to turn the paper around if I want to read sports. It should be there. Of course, if I want to go back and see what the newspaper wants to report, there should be another tab. But I don't want to go through that trouble. You should know what I want. So a digital first news feed that's personalized. Guess what happens? This news site doubles, triples in its usage and propensity, because the experience has been redefined. So the mobile phone is actually redefining our banking experience. The mobile phone is redefining our retail experience, our shopping experience, our news experience. As marketeers, everything that we look at now, we're looking at from the lens of a small screen. And it's not easy. How do you look at a banking experience from a small screen? But that's the world, and that's what it's come down to. I'm going to make 3 other points today. And in the spirit of brush strokes, I'm going to go through those 3 points, and I'm going to connect back to what I started with. The first is context and content. The first thing that happens when you begin to identify customers, and you'll hear a lot about this today, hopefully, is that you know where they are, you're able to chase them. So when I shop on Amazon or Flipkart or wherever else I shop, what happens is that the mobile phone, which is me, but it's called my mobile phone, actually becomes an entity in somebody's life. And the person knows I went to Amazon or Flipkart or wherever else I went, I looked for a pair of headphones. The person knows I'm interested, the person knows I'm looking, the person knows I went into a particular product, I checked it out, but I didn't buy it, so he starts chasing me. I go to Facebook, headphones. I go to YouTube, headphones. I go to sites I shouldn't go to, headphones. And I'm wondering, I'm like, why do headphones want to advertise on these sites? They actually want to advertise to me, right? But what marketers often forget and marketeers are beginning to get more and more conscious about is context and content, both of which are interrelated concepts. The context of me on a social platform is very different of the context of me on a shopping platform, on a news platform, and on a banking platform. And the content that you need to deliver to me, therefore, needs to be different. Now, if I was on a social site and I saw a post which said, oh, guess what? 5 friends you know looked for headphones and this is what they picked. That's very different from headphones, right? If I was on YouTube and I just stumbled across a recommendation video, of course, I'm not really stumbling across this, but somebody is making sure I stumble across a recommendation video which says how to choose a headphone. You know what? There's a chance I'll click through and actually go buy that headphone. But by just planting an ad which says headphone, you're doing nothing except reminding me that I didn't like anything on your site. Now, there's a lot of advertising growth happening across the world. Digital advertising is probably the fastest growing segment of advertising in the world right now. But among the various types of advertising that's growing, there is a concept called native advertising. Native advertising basically means advertising that fits seamlessly into the experience that you're part of currently. So if you were on a particular site, the native ad, labeled as an ad, would look like part of the experience and therefore would not jar out shouting at you. But a subset of that, which is called native content, is actually growing even more rapidly than native advertising. And that subset is basically the ability to customize your content with rich media and with different formats and be native to the platform that you're on. This is the intersection of the human being and the machine. This is where content and context actually come together and talk to you via your mobile phone, which is your identity, right? And basically create not just a personalized delivery, but a personalized message. This is what Netflix is so good at, right? And therefore, content and context are as important as a consumer in this era of personalization and as you search for that pin in the haystack. I love talking about this because people don't seem to talk about it at all. We all talk about vernacular customers, non-metro customers. We all talk about voice and video. But I don't know if anybody ever realizes that our gender deficit of the internet is about 7 or 8%, which means from the global average, the ratio of women on the internet, the average of women on the internet, percentage of women on the internet, we're about 7 or 8% short. But that number is growing and it's changing. And in the next 3 to 5 years, that's the bonus audience. That's the audience that's exploding. And we just don't talk about how important, as marketeers, it is for us to be designing products, designing content, and there's lots of issues, by the way. Only 3% of the content that's actually created on the internet for 40% of the users, which is women. But we often forget that this audience is the real bonus audience. This is the audience that's exploding. Even within the vernacular audience, if you look at the audience that will explode, it'll be women. Women will give you bonus, it'll give you explosion, and it'll give you huge increments over the next few years. Now, I truly believe that women are the champions of the world. They're balancing far more things than I ever will. They're doing far more than at least half of us in this room ever will. And a lot of the industries on the internet that are currently being fueled by convenience, because all of commerce is fueled by convenience, all of retail is fueled by convenience, it's actually being fueled by this new force. So as more and more women get onto the internet, and the mobile phone, mind you, is the point of change. The mobile phone is what has created the point of inflection for women on the internet in India. Because as every woman gets a mobile phone in her hand and has access to the internet, this explosion is going to be an explosion like no other. Just for record, there are many categories even today which are being driven by women on the internet. Retail, commerce, of course, all the categories that target women, such as beauty, specific categories specific to women are all, of course, being driven by women. Increasingly, all of e-commerce is being driven by women. Here's a small stat, and I apologize for the very stereotypical blue and pink color. Very, very stereotypical, but for the loss of time, I let that go. But what you see on the left is actually the percentage of women versus the percentage of men. But what you see on the right is the time spent on commerce, on the internet. And you can see the difference in that number. So we shouldn't underestimate the power of women as customers. And this is also a call to action for more women as marketeers. Our marketing teams severely lack diversity. And I think that's one thing that's going to happen over a period of time. And it's something we're just not talking about enough. The internet has often been accused of commoditizing the marketplace, of commoditizing brands, of making discounting and cheap products available to everybody, and therefore not allowing the big guys who invested in R&D and research and whatever else you've got a level playing field. Whereas the truth, according to me, is a little different. First of all, if you were to look at the biggest brands in the world today, they're all technology brands, right? So the biggest brands in the world and the brands that we interact with today are not Coke, Pepsi, McDonald's, which is what the list used to look like, IBM. This is what the list used to look like 10 years ago. It's actually Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Now, when you look at this list, the first point I'd like to make is that we are in a world of brands. Just the legacy of the brick and mortar brands has been broken. And the legacy of other brands, which have their own hegemony and their own muscle, has invaded our lives. Now, these brands are accused sometimes of creating marketplaces and information that make it difficult for brands to survive. It's true. This is my search for headphones, by the way. And this is what it led to. What do I buy? Right? How do I look for a headphone? And marketeers often tell me that trust is no more in the play. The whole equity equation with trust for big brands is no more in the play. That's not true. What is true is that the way to build trust now is different, and it's tougher for 2 or 3 reasons. First, young people on the internet did not grow up in the brick and mortar world where trust was built for the big brick and mortar brands, right? So for them, this is the new world. You're operating on a level playing field and you need to build trust all over again. Second, you don't just build trust by saying, trust me, I'm a big brand. You build trust by doing all the things we've spoken about in the last 45 minutes, then providing experience, then making sure that people talk about that experience, and ensuring that if somebody doesn't talk well about that experience, you get back to the person and you fix it. This is a very different world from the world brick and mortar retail is used to. But from my experience, from the research that I've done in the last 5 years, I can tell you trust is huge, and it's becoming bigger in a world where there is so much misinformation, where WhatsApp forwards sort of, invade our lives, where discounts give us choices like the one I just showed you. You don't know what to click through. People are craving for trust. This goes back to what I started with. Human beings haven't changed. They want to trust. They want to feel good about brands. They want brands in their life. They want this brand they can be loyal to. It's just that they're not willing to let it be anybody's birthright. So they aren't fickle. They're just making it tougher for us. So on that note, I want to sum up everything that I've said today, and hopefully these will be brushstrokes that will come up again in the day. The ecosystem will converge around the mobile experience, deeper penetration, media convergence, new forms of consumption, personalization, and most importantly, brands. The role for brand builders, marketeers, brand leaders is only going to become tougher but more important in the years to come, not less important. And on that note, thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
First of all, thank you so much for such a beautiful talk. That was really insightful, and I'm really feeling lucky to be a part of this event today. How to get that idea, that mindset, where you can actually anticipate that tectonic shift that might happen irrespective of the industry. How can I actually develop myself as a strong marketeer and stay ahead of the game?
So a few years ago, I left a very conventional marketing job, and I decided I wanted to not do any of what I was doing anymore. And somebody asked me, "What do you want to do, and why are you doing this?" And I said, "I'm doing this because I'm paranoid that I will get left behind. I'm paranoid that I don't know what the 23, 24, 25-year-old knows today. So I want to be part of the future. And however uncomfortable it is and however difficult it is, I want to try and fit into a role that belongs 10 years from now, or an industry that belongs 15 years from now." And I have actually pushed myself over the last 5 years to try and do some of that. Some successfully, some unsuccessfully. So that's one example I can give you from my life. The second thing is, and I keep saying this to everybody, study the world. Stop studying micro pieces. Study what's happening in the world and how it's influencing people. When you study the world, it is so much easier to tell what's going to happen next, because what's happening on the internet is not as important as what the internet can enable, and what you think in your personal life, because you're also a consumer, the internet should enable. Because if the internet should enable it for you, it'll probably enable it for somebody. And to continuously keep thinking about that relationship between consumers and the world around them is possibly the only way to stay tuned with what's happening. I don't think I'm an expert at looking at the future. I wish I was. I do think I try, and I don't think it's possible to look at the future 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. Not for me. So try and see if I can see the future over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And that, I think, is valuable in today's world. But you make a very good point. You have to keep looking ahead, because the world's moving at supersonic speed. It's quite intimidating sometimes.
If somebody wants to be critical about your product, they'll just go ahead and have that commented in Google, and that becomes evident. But when good things happen, they are not very proactive, probably going into internet or going into the public portals and praising the product. So when you talk about building trust, and these are all content which are reachable to millions of people. So how to manage that, how to build that trust continuously when the praise part is probably lesser than the critics part? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. Trust comes at so many different levels. And you're a product manager, so I'll peg it at the level of the product. The most basic form of trust is, I've given my time into this product. I trust the product will work, or the service will work. And when it doesn't work, you've broken my trust, because I came to you on the promise that this will work. Right? Now, when things do work, they're supposed to work. There is, sure, it's building trust. If they work again and again and again, I trust that they will work, and I will keep coming back to you. But there's no cause for reward. We shouldn't be expecting reward because our products work. But we should be expecting flack when our products don't work. And I think the best way to deal with that break in trust, and trust me, somebody only goes onto social media. 90% of people who go onto social media to comment go there because they feel distressed or they feel unhappy. Somebody who actually takes the trouble to go and put a comment is somebody who's truly distressed by the fact that your product or service let them down. And there is only one way to deal with that, which is to accept you failed, or to talk to the person, say you didn't. But in my experience, 80% of the times it's because we failed, right? 10% of the times is because people think we failed, which is not nice. But 80% of the times is because a product, for whatever reasons, actually didn't deliver their expectation. And you can't deliver everybody's expectation all the time. Sometimes it's okay to say, I'm sorry, but I can't. Sometimes it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I messed up. And sometimes it's just okay to go back and say, how do I ensure this doesn't happen again? But you have broken somebody's trust when your product didn't work. Right. And it's unfair to ask for the person to compliment you just because your product worked. That's my belief.
And what if the prospects who are coming into the picture, they would also, even if there is one particular comment which is negative and all the 9 are positive, they will probably go into the negative one.
You really think so? As a consumer, when you read 10 comments, 1 is negative, 9 is positive.
Sometimes they come up. So, is there a way we can handle that also?
No, just make sure that 9 becomes 99 so that the 1 looks affirmative, right?
Yeah.
My question is regarding the e-commerce commoditized brands. So, in your view, you said that the brands are coming up and they are actually getting commoditized. However, what is your view on suppose the big billion day sales or some kind of this big sales that are happening where they're actually employing deep discounting techniques? So is it actually hampering their, the brand's equity? And on the other hand, I completely agree that this is actually, they are actually employing these techniques to boost demand and, consumption of the consumers. But does it actually have a negative impact on the brands themselves who are actually, working with these e-commerce platforms? So that's my question.
I'll start with the last one. It really depends on the brand strategy. So that's a longish answer, but it depends on what the brand strategy is. If it's okay to be in a marketplace, then it's fine. If it doesn't want to be in a marketplace, it's not. But let me take the rest of your question, which is very interesting. I did not say that brands are getting commoditized. Brands get commoditized when they allow themselves to be commoditized. If for the whole year you worked hard and built consumer trust and consumer love, then the chance that if 5 things are listed there and you're even a little more expensive, you will still get click through is very, very high. It is only when you've allowed yourself to become commoditized and you've allowed yourself to become one of the 5 brands and the other 4 brands have lesser cost, lesser infrastructure, lesser issues, more ability to discount, that you've allowed yourself to go into that trap. So the process of building love and trust on the internet is far, far tougher, far more rigorous and far more continuous than it is in a television world or in a newspaper world, right? So that's one point. The second point is you've got to play the game that's being played. If you really want market share and there is a big billion sale, my personal view is if your business can afford it, you should be part of the big billion sale. If you're a brand that is truly invested in both trust and love, you'll be the least afraid to be in that sale because you will be the least commoditized. In fact, you will sell the most because the value ascribed to you is so high. Finally, brand equity is the premium somebody pays, the little extra somebody pays, or the little extra somebody walks, or the little few other extra clicks somebody does for your brand because they love and respect it. It's up to you to build it for however much time you can, so that you can milk it in a big discount day. Discounts are not the enemy of brand love or brand premium. It's my view.